Story begins with two children playing together, while pretending to be a monster and a wizard. During the game, the boy suddenly hits the girl on the head, making her shout angrily and ask why he hit her. The boy simply explains that monsters are supposed to lose to wizards. At that moment, an old man approaches them and greets them cheerfully, saying they are quite energetic this morning. The children happily call him Grandpa Robus, and the boy immediately asks what he must do to become a wizard. Robus sighs and explains that a person cannot become a wizard simply because they wish to. He says that wizards are the apex of humanity, beings who stand at the highest hierarchy and rule over ordinary humans. According to him, only two types of people usually become wizards: nobles and knights who inherit mysterious power from their ancestors. Because of that, he bluntly tells the boy that he unfortunately cannot become a wizard. A man nearby softly scolds Rebus for speaking so harshly to a child, but he also knows that what he said is the truth. Soon he steps in with worrying news. He explains that a monster has appeared near the village. Rebus already seems to know about it and says that a man named Rop saw the creature the previous night. According to the rumor, the monster's entire body was covered in pitch-black shadows and it was as large as a house. However, Rebus tells everyone not to panic, because the village chief has already gone to the city to request help from a wizard, and once the wizard arrives, the monster will surely be subjugated. The girl's mother feels relieved to hear this, and she tells the children not to go near the forest for the time being. Rebus warns everyone to stay cautious. He reminds them that without a wizard, defeating a monster is almost impossible. The man then asks whether everyone in the village already knows about the monster. Rebus confirms that they do, but the man suddenly asks about the shepherd who lives alone on Hizaril Hill and wonders if he has heard the news. The scene then shifts to Hizaril Hill, where a young boy lies lazily on the grass while watching over his flock of sheep. Bored by the same scenery repeating every day, he mutters that at this rate he might forget how to talk from lack of conversation. Suddenly someone calls him a brat, and the boy looks up to see the same old man Rebus standing there. Rebus scolds him, saying the sun has not even begun to set and he is already slacking off. The boy immediately tells him to move aside because he is blocking the sunlight. Rebus asks whether the boy still has no manners, and wonders if he is still holding a grudge about the incident from the past. The boy coldly asks whether Rebus means the time when his mother died, and Rebus tried to quietly turn the sheep into shared village property. He says that if that is the incident Rebus is referring to, then yes, he still remembers it. The boy bluntly states that he is not generous enough to share the inheritance left by his mother. He then adds that since they are not close enough to casually ask how each other are doing, Rebus should just say what he came for. Rebus calls him little brat, but the boy glares at him sharply. The old man then informs him about the monster that has appeared near the village, and explains that people say it looks like a leopard as large as a house. The boy calmly remarks that it sounds like a serious problem. Rebus asks whether he is not afraid, especially since he lives alone on the hill and would be the monster's easiest target. He says he does not know what kind of courage the boy possesses, but explains that the village chief has gone to the city to request a wizard, and that he only came to warn him because he was worried. Boy's expression changes slightly, but he bluntly replies that Rebus should be honest, and admit that he is actually worried about the sheep, not about him. With a cold look, he tells the old man that if he is done talking, he should leave. Our boy even adds that Rebus's breath smells so bad that it might rot his nose. With that insult, Rebus quietly turns around and leaves. After the old man disappears, Boy begins thinking about monsters. Monsters are beasts that wield mysterious powers and magic. Just as humans have wizards, beasts have monsters. Since a monster has appeared near the village, a wizard will soon come to deal with it. He realizes that this might be the first time he will ever see a wizard with his own eyes. However, he doubts that the wizard summoned by the village chief will be anything special. Even so, he is still curious to see one. Just then he suddenly smells something strange in the air. His expression stiffens as he realizes what the scent is. It is the smell of blood. After some time, our boy enters the forest, following the smell of blood that he sensed earlier. He is certain the scent is coming from somewhere nearby. He soon notices something lying on the ground. When he approaches, he realizes it is the corpse of the old man Rebus. Our boy mutters that the old man told him to be careful, yet he was the one who entered the forest first. Looking closely at the wounds, he immediately understands that these injuries could not have been caused by an ordinary wild animal. He concludes that it must have been the monster. At that moment, he suddenly senses someone's presence behind him. Turning around, he sees the monster itself emerging from the shadows. It is the same leopard-like creature, its entire body covered in pitch-black shadow and its size as large as a house. The scene briefly shifts back to the village, where the same child from earlier asks his father if a grown adult cannot defeat a monster. His father calmly replies that if an ordinary adult like him rushed toward such a creature, there would not even be enough left to collect his bones. The boy becomes worried and asks what will happen to their village. His father reassures him not to worry, because the village chief has gone to bring a wizard, and once the wizard arrives, the monster will be subjugated. The boy asks if it is really true that a wizard will defeat the monster. His father confidently explains that wizards are great beings born with magic, and they can kill monsters with just a single word. The scene returns to the forest, where the enormous leopard monster growls at our boy. However, he looks at the creature calmly as if it were nothing. Without moving, he quietly chants the word die. The leopard suddenly recoils and steps back in confusion, unable to understand what just happened. The monster growls again and prepares to attack, but our boy releases a faint aura around himself, revealing that he is actually a wizard. However, he frowns slightly and mutters that the spell did not work the way he expected. Suddenly, the monster leaps toward him in mid-air. Our boy calmly chants again and says stop. Instinctively, the leopard halts its movement and jumps back again. Our boy clicks his tongue and mutters that he expected killing it to fail, but he at least thought it would be stopped properly. The monster slams its claws onto the ground with tremendous force, but he simply steps aside to avoid the attack. Realizing that those methods are not working perfectly, he casually picks up a stone from the ground and takes out a slingshot, saying that this should work instead. The monster prepares to attack again. Our boy hardens the stone with magic, places it in the slingshot, and begins spinning it rapidly. His eyes glow faintly as he releases it with full force. The stone shoots forward with incredible speed and smashes directly into the leopard's ear, shattering it instantly. The monster roars in rage and raises both claws to attack again. Our boy smiles slightly and chants another command. Suddenly, a massive rock falls from above, slamming into the monster's head. The beast screams in agony before collapsing heavily onto the ground. Standing there calmly, our boy looks at the defeated monster and mutters that this is the first time he has used that technique on an actual monster. Staring at the corpse, he casually thinks that he should probably throw it into some valley somewhere. After all, he ended up doing all this trouble for the sake of those townsfolk. Our boy already knows that he is a wizard, and he first realized it when he was 8 years old. By the time he turned 10, he could even make objects float in the air inside his house. One day, he proudly told his mother that he could fly things and even create fire and wind. The memory of that day is still very clear to him because it was the first time his mother ever became angry with him. She shouted at him to stop and called him by his name, Terron, telling him that if he wanted to live with his mother for a long time, he must promise never to use that power again and never show it in front of other people. Little Terron asked why he had to hide it. His mother reminded him of the story about nobles and knights and explained that even among wizards there are two types. Nobles are descendants of the divine people known as the Freyans, who once descended to save ancient humanity. Knights, on the other hand, are descendants of those nobles whose blood had mixed with ordinary humans over generations. Because of that, nobles and knights are treated very differently, even though both possess magical power. His mother told him that he had inherited his abilities from his father, who was a knight, and warned him that many evil nobles exist outside their town. Those nobles treat knights as nothing more than slaves. Because of that, she begged him to promise that no one could ever find out that he was a wizard. 8 years have passed since that day, and our boy Terron has kept that promise without fail. Even now, he has no desire to reveal that he is a wizard or to leave the mountain where he lives. One morning, someone knocks on the door of his house. When he steps outside, he finds 3 men from the village waiting there. Yawning lazily, Terron asks them why they came. The men accuse him of killing old man Rabus. One of them grabs Terron by the collar and angrily calls him shameless, claiming that he hurt the old man and threw him outside so the monster would eat him. Our boy immediately understands what they are trying to do. They are attempting to frame him. Calmly, he responds that the oldest man in the village died alone, while the younger men were too frightened to face the monster themselves. He clearly sees their plan. Blaming Terron is the easiest way for them to shift responsibility away from themselves. The men suddenly throws a punch at him, but our boy simply leans back and lets the punch miss. In the next moment, he slams his head into the man's nose, breaking it instantly and sending the man crashing to the ground. Another man tries to attack him, but our boy quietly chants a small spell, causing the attacker to collapse as well. A third man swings a stick at him, but Terron easily dodges the attack, grabs the man's wrist, and strikes him back with the same stick. When the remaining men rush toward him together, our boy calmly raises his fists and knocks them down one after another. In a short time, he defeats all of them without revealing that he used magic. Looking down at the defeated men, he orders them to spend their energy arranging Rabus's funeral instead of causing trouble. Some girls who had been watching from the side are asked whether they came to fight too, but they quickly deny it and say they only came to see him. After a brief silence, Terron tells them to take these idiots away with them. After that, he returns inside his house. He knows that the town will become chaotic again, because the villagers will likely use this incident as an excuse to cheat him when he comes down the mountain to trade. Still, he does not worry much about it. If they try anything unfair, he can simply beat them until they agree to a fair deal. For now, he knows that he gave those men a proper beating, so they will probably stay away for a while. Suddenly, someone knocks on the door again. Terron angrily walks over and opens the gate, asking why they came back already. However, this time it is a man with a cold expression standing outside. Our boy pauses and asks for his identity. The man calmly says that he is a traveler, and asks for a favor. Our boy becomes silent for a brief moment because this is the first time he has seen someone from outside the town. Realizing he reacted rudely, he quickly apologizes and explains that a few uninvited guests had just come earlier. Terron mutters to himself that his mother taught him proper manners and wonders awkwardly if the way he spoke was polite enough. After all, he has never spoken nicely to anyone in this pathetic town before, so this situation feels strange to him. Seeing the sword hanging at the traveler's side, our boy wonders why someone would carry a weapon in such a sleepy countryside town. He asks if the man is looking for an inn, but after a brief sigh, he simply invites him inside instead. After some time, the two of them are sitting together while eating. Terron apologizes for not being able to offer much food, but to the traveler it looks like a proper feast. The man then says that Terron has surprised him and asks if he has really never met anyone from outside the town before. Our boy replies that he was born and raised on this hill, and has lived his whole life as a shepherd, and it is rare for anyone from outside to visit such a small place. However, the traveler observes the way Terron calmly drinks his water, and quietly mutters that this is interesting. The traveler then remarks that for someone who grew up here as a shepherd, Terron is very well mannered, and his parents must have taught him well. Our boy replies that he learned everything from his mother, who passed away a few years ago due to illness. The man nods and says that she must have been a wonderful woman to raise such a proud son, and he is certain she now resides among the gods in the heavenly palace. Terron thanks him, but quickly denies the praise, saying that he simply lives the way his mother taught him. Then he asks what brings the traveler all the way to this quiet countryside town. The man calmly explains that he was asked for a favor, because the people in this town were searching for someone to deal with a monster. Terron becomes slightly surprised when the man adds that he is a wizard. After a short silence, our boy asks if he must be the wizard that the village elder mentioned earlier. The man confirms it. The wizard then asks Terron something strange. He says that he can sense that a monster was recently in this area, yet he cannot find any sign of it anymore. Our boy's expression changes slightly as he listens. The man continues speaking, pointing out that Terron seems to know about both the village elder and the monster, yet he is sitting here calmly instead of running away. The wizard then asks if Terron is not afraid, because if the monster attacked a human living nearby, the first target would probably be him. With a cold look, the wizard cracks his knuckles and asks the boy's identity, saying that he seems far too brave for a shepherd who has never left this town. At that moment, Terron remembers something from the past. When he once asked his mother why he must hide the fact that he is a wizard, she explained that there are many dangerous nobles in the outside world. If nobles are like shepherds, then knights are the dogs they keep. Sometimes they treat them kindly like family, but at any moment they can sell them, sacrifice them, or use them however they want. His mother never wanted Terron to live such a life. She told him to always remember that no one must ever know he is a wizard, especially not another wizard. Now standing in the present, Terron realizes the meaning behind his mother's warning. To avoid being exposed as a wizard, there might come a moment when he would have to kill someone. Our boy stares at the man with a cold expression, thinking that perhaps this is the moment it comes to. The wizard notices his silence and coldly asks why he is not answering. Then suddenly the man's expression changes, and he laughs lightly. With a smile, he says that making such a serious face over his joke only makes the situation awkward. Our boy is caught off guard and realizes that the wizard was only joking. Feeling embarrassed, he apologizes and says that he simply does not have a good sense of humor. The man stands up and says that he should be the one apologizing, because he flustered him unnecessarily. Terron smiles awkwardly, and replies that it was the first time he had heard such a strange joke, so it caught him off guard. The traveler laughs and admits that Terron's reaction was so entertaining that he may have taken the test a little too far. Then the man raises his hand, and says that they have not properly introduced themselves yet. With a friendly smile, he says that his name is Terron, a wanderer. Our boy then introduces himself as Terron, a shepherd. That night during dinner, the two of them casually share their ages. The man reveals that he is 75 years old, while our boy says that he is 18. Terron looks at him with surprise and says that he does not look that old at all. The man calmly replies that wizards age much more slowly than ordinary people, so their appearance often does not match their real age. Curious, Terron then asks how he ended up becoming a wanderer. The man explains that he once served the Arabian family for 60 years. After leaving them, he decided that in the later years of his life he wanted to travel freely instead of staying in one place. That is how he began wandering from place to place. The two of them continue talking for a long time. As they exchange stories and casual remarks, our boy gradually realizes something surprising. He never knew that talking with a random person could be this enjoyable. Before he knows it, the night passes and morning arrives. The man stands up and says that it is time for him to leave. Before going, he places a silver Arabian coin on the table, saying that it should be more than enough to cover the cost of the meal. Terron accepts the coin and tells him that he hopes the hunt for the monster will go smoothly. The man smiles and replies that he should not speak as if they will never meet again. Later that afternoon, Terron is once again grazing his sheep in the fields. He reflects on what happened earlier. It was the first time he had ever met another wizard, but more than that, it had been a long time since he had enjoyed such a comfortable conversation with someone. The ease and humor that naturally slipped into the man's way of speaking had left a strong impression on him. As days pass, that man occasionally returns to visit him, and each time they spend a little time talking. Terron had always believed that knights were nothing more than emotionless hunting dogs, serving arrogant nobles. However, now his expression becomes serious. He does not know how to tell the man to stop, because the truth is that there is no monster left on Hizarl Hill anymore. We see the man still wandering through the forest while searching for the monster. As he moves through the trees, he discovers signs of a battle that happened earlier, but strangely, he cannot feel any trace of the monster's presence anymore. The man wonders if the monster might have already been hunted. Soon his eyes fall on something unusual, a stone stabbed deep into the trunk of a tree. Seeing it, he mutters to himself, wondering who in the world could have hunted the monster here. For a moment, he considers the possibility that the village chief may have asked another wizard to deal with it as well. After thinking about it for a while, he smiles slightly and decides that it does not really matter. As long as the monster is gone and the area is safe again, that is what truly matters. Suddenly, his expression changes. Instinctively, he flips backward just in time. In the next moment, the leopard monster from earlier appears. Its face is horribly broken, and a dark aura surrounds its body. The man immediately recognizes it and calls it a monster's wraith. He cannot understand who would allow something like this to happen. The leopard wraith lunges forward and slashes at him with its claws, but the man quickly jumps aside to avoid the attack. While fighting it, he realizes what must have happened. If a wizard kills a monster but fails to absorb or disperse the mana inside the corpse, the remaining mana can corrupt the body and turn it into a wraith. As the battle continues, the man thinks that any wizard who hunts monsters should know such a basic rule. That means the one who killed this monster must also have been a wizard. Yet he does not understand why that person would leave the corpse behind like this. For a moment, he considers the possibility that the wizard simply did not know the rule, but he quickly rejects that idea. A knight who does not even know something so basic would never be strong enough to defeat a monster like this in the first place. The man gathers mana in his hand and forms a glowing sphere of energy. Deciding that he must destroy the creature, he shapes the mana into a magical arrow and fires it toward the wraith. However, before the attack can strike, the magic is suddenly nullified. The man's eyes widen in shock. He wonders if that means the monster's mana is actually stronger than his own. In the next instant, the wraith disappears. The man immediately realizes what happened. The creature used magic to counter his attack. Suddenly, claws burst out from his own shadow, and the monster appears behind him, raising its claws high before slamming into his side. The man is wounded as he stumbles back. He realizes that this is not a level of power a mere knight could handle. At the very least, someone would need to be a lower-ranked noble to stand a chance against such a wraith. He stops himself and grimaces, thinking that he never expected to encounter a monster of this level in such a remote mountain village. Clenching his teeth, the man mutters that this might be the end for him. However, he refuses to give up. Even if he dies today, he decides that he will take the monster down with him. He gathers all the remaining mana in his hand, planning to stab the wraith directly the moment it attacks. The monster lunges toward him again. At the same time, the man charges forward with all his strength, preparing for the final clash. Just before they collide, something suddenly glows from the side. A glowing stone flies through the air and pierces straight through the monster. The man freezes in shock, unable to understand what just happened. The wraith trembles for a moment before collapsing to the ground. From the side, Terron calmly steps forward and asks if he is alright. The man stares at him in disbelief and mutters that a shepherd's jokes can be quite startling too. Still shocked, he asks Terron how he could be a wizard and why he never told him before. Terron remains silent. The man then asks an even more important question. If Terron is a wizard, why did he help him instead of simply walking away? At that moment, Terron remembers something from earlier. He had once asked this man why he was going so far just to hunt a monster here. With his skills, the man could easily earn a lot of money and live comfortably elsewhere. The man had replied that the people of this village were pitiful, living on the frontier where they tremble in fear without even the most basic protection. Terron had protested that it was not the man's responsibility, but the man had explained that a wizard is someone who inherits the power of the gods. Because of that, wizards should live with pride in protecting powerless common people. Then the man had smiled and admitted that not every wizard believes that. Everyone has their own beliefs and their own way of living. Back in the present, Terron smiles slightly and answers with calm words. He says that everyone indeed has their own way of living. Suddenly, the monster lunges toward them again. Both of them quickly jump aside to avoid the attack. The man immediately speaks with urgency, telling Terron to listen carefully because this creature is not something they can handle easily. He explains that a monster of this level normally requires at least a noble-class wizard to fight it. He orders Terron to run back to the village and warn the people to evacuate while he holds the bizarre creature off for as long as he can. However, the man himself is not even sure how long he will be able to stop the monster. While gathering his energy on a nearby stone, Terron calmly says that if this attack lands, everything should be fine. Hearing that, the man becomes shocked. He realizes that the earlier attack Terron used was not even his full strength. He cannot understand how a knight hiding in a remote mountain village could possibly defeat a wraith that even nobles struggle to handle. Then something unbelievable happens. All the nearby stones begin rising from the ground, slowly gathering around Terron. Blue energy bursts out from his body, and the sight in front of the man looks like the birth of a wizard who might one day shake the entire world. Terron mutters that he was also curious to see what his limits are. The stones spin around him like a storm. The man quickly shouts that he cannot allow Terron to fight alone like this. No matter how extraordinary his talent might be, this monster is still a dangerous opponent. He insists that they must join forces. At that moment, the wraith suddenly attacks the man again. But before the claws can strike him, one of Terron's stones shoots forward and smashes the monster aside. The man freezes in shock because he could not even react to the attack that was meant to kill him. Meanwhile, Terron continues launching stones at the creature again and again, slamming it repeatedly. However, something confuses him. Even after being hit so many times, the monster continues attacking him. Terron mutters in frustration, wondering why his attacks are not working. The man immediately shouts the answer. He explains that wraiths cannot be killed with physical attacks. When Terron asks what he should do instead, the man tells him that the creature must be destroyed using fire or lightning magic. The man quickly ignites flames around the monster, but even that is not enough to finish it immediately. Watching Terron's fighting style, the man becomes even more shocked. Applying a wizard's power to living beings while maintaining proper magical control is basic knowledge for any trained wizard. Yet Terron clearly does not know even the most fundamental rules. Suddenly the man realizes something shocking. If Terron was the one who killed the monster earlier and left the corpse behind, that means Terron has never absorbed mana from a monster in his entire life. The man quickly orders Terron to gather fire and prepare to release it. Terron raises his hand and begins forming flames. The man watches closely, thinking that creating fire magic itself is not difficult for a wizard, but controlling it usually requires long training. However, Terron controls the fire effortlessly, shaping it perfectly in his hand. The man's eyes widen in disbelief. Then Terron steps forward and slams the blazing fire directly into the monster. The wraith begins burning violently. The man quickly shouts for Terron to keep pouring mana into the flames so they will not go out. He tells him that the only way to destroy a wraith completely is to burn everything about it. Terron continues feeding the fire with mana, and the monster is gradually consumed by the flames. After some time, the wraith finally collapses, completely burned away. The man stands there in disbelief. A wraith of this level should require noble class power to defeat, yet Terron has destroyed it himself. A simple shepherd from a mountain village has accomplished something extraordinary. Standing above the burned corpse, Terron calmly asks if it is over. The man replies that if Terron does not want the monster to turn into another wraith, he must first absorb the remaining mana, and Terron asks how he should do that. The man tells him to imagine that he is draining the energy into himself. Terron raises his hand and focuses. Soon green energy begins flowing out of the monster's remains and into his body. The new power spreads through him completely. Terron looks surprised as he feels the strange sensation. The man asks him if he feels a certain pleasure while absorbing the mana. Terron cannot believe what he is experiencing, even though it is happening right in front of him. The man asks again, shocked, whether this is truly the first time Terron has ever absorbed mana. Terron confirms that it is. The man cannot believe it. Normally, after a wizard awakens their power, their mana slowly grows over time. The fastest way to grow stronger is to defeat monsters or other wizards and absorb their mana. Yet this is Terron's first time ever absorbing mana, and he is already able to use magic at such a level. That means his innate potential is on an entirely different level. Realizing this, the man bows slightly and apologizes for his earlier rude behavior. He respectfully asks which noble house Terron belongs to. Terron simply looks at him calmly and tells him that he should wipe the blood first. Only then does the man realize that his hand is still bleeding from the earlier wound. After some time, we see Terron finishes bandaging Chiron's wounded hand. Chiron apologizes for his earlier rudeness, saying that he made someone as esteemed as Terron work for him like this. Terron immediately becomes irritated. With a sharp look, he replies that he is not someone so esteemed, and he has already told him many times that he is just a shepherd who does not even know who his father is. Glaring at him, Terron asks him to stop saying things like that. Chiron looks at him for a moment before asking another question. He wonders why a wizard as powerful as Terron would live his life as a shepherd on a remote hill like this. He admits that he does not mean to challenge him, but it simply does not match Terron's ability. Terron calmly replies that it was because of his mother's request. She told him that there were nobles living beyond the mountain, and if it was revealed that he was a wizard, those nobles would only try to use him for their own purposes. Chiron quietly calls Terron's mother a wise woman. Terron becomes slightly surprised by that reaction, because he expected Kei-chan to criticize her for being overly protective. Instead, Kei-chan explains that Terron's mother was not entirely wrong. Wizards possess great power, and great power inevitably brings conflict. Kei-chan then recalls something from the past. About 20 years ago, there was a massive war between the Arabian house, which he once served, and the great house of Zahar. During that war, thousands of people died. Out of roughly 3,000 knights, more than 900 were killed, nearly a third of them. Kei-chan lowers his gaze as he continues speaking. Sadly, everyone close to him was among those who died. His friend who used to joke about opening a small laundry shop one day, his teacher who always scolded him for still having much to learn, and even his beloved wife and his son. They were all slaughtered by the forces of Zahar, while he alone survived. Kei-chan sighs quietly, and says that because of this, Terron's mother was correct in some ways. A knight's life can disappear even more easily than that of an ordinary commoner. However, there was one thing she misunderstood: Terron's true aptitude. Terron does not understand what he means by that. Kei-chan explains that it is embarrassing for him to admit this. Even though he is a knight with fairly good skill, Terron easily destroyed a monster wraith that Kei-chan himself could not defeat. Because of that, Terron's potential is not merely that of a knight. At the very least, his talent belongs to the noble class, and among nobles his aptitude would likely place him in the upper tier. Terron becomes slightly confused and replies that his mother always said his father was only a knight, which would mean she was lying. Kei-chan shakes his head and explains that it is rare but not impossible. Sometimes a child with lesser ability is born among noble families, and sometimes a child with noble-level talent can be born among the descendants of knights. After saying this, Kei-chan slowly stands up. He looks at Terron seriously and says that it might be better for him to leave this hill and see the outside world. He explains that humanity desperately needs more strong nobles and knights. Even now, humans are not the absolute masters of this world. Long ago, the other races that were driven away by the gods were not completely destroyed. They are still watching, waiting for a chance to rise again. Meanwhile, the nobles themselves are constantly fighting wars against one another. Because of that, Kei-chan says that in this era, humanity desperately needs powerful and compassionate nobles like Terron. Before leaving, Kei-chan looks at Terron and says that more than anything else, he can tell that Terron is not truly satisfied living as a shepherd. Terron becomes silent for a brief moment before asking what he could possibly gain if he went down the mountain. Kei-chan replies that it completely depends on what Terron himself wants. He explains that things like wealth, fame, authority, family, or even friendship are difficult to obtain while living alone in a remote village like this. He asks Terron to imagine the possibilities. Terron could become a wanderer like him and travel the world destroying monsters that threaten innocent people. He could also become an explorer who ventures into unknown lands. Or perhaps he could be adopted into a noble house and walk the path of power. As Kei-chan begins walking away, Terron suddenly stops him outside the house. Terron admits that Kei-chan is probably right. Living as a shepherd and guarding sheep on this hill will never be as interesting as seeing the world below the mountain. For the first time, our boy becomes seriously curious about the outside world. Kei-chan smiles slightly, but says he worries that he might be giving Terron expectations without knowing the full truth. Even so, he promises that he will support Terron in whatever path he chooses. Then he asks Terron about his bloodline, but Terron simply answers that he does not know anything about it. Kei-chan apologizes, realizing that Terron has never learned proper magical knowledge. He explains that bloodline abilities are special traits inherited by nobles from their ancient ancestors, the Freyans. Possessing such an ability is what usually distinguishes nobles from knights. To demonstrate, Kei-chan briefly shows his fire magic, then asks Terron if there are any spells that feel unusually easy for him to use, or if he has any special ability that does not require magic at all. Terron becomes confused, and asks if that simply means he is naturally strong. Kei-chan explains that even having mana alone strengthens a wizard's body to some extent. Thinking about it for a moment, Terron says that he has always had a very sharp sense of smell, and that he is quite good at throwing stones. Hearing this, Kei-chan comments that being skilled with throwing weapons is one of the known traits of House Arabian, although it is not an especially rare ability. He asks Terron to tell him more about his abilities. After listening for some time, Kei-chan's expression suddenly changes. Terron notices the change, and asks why he suddenly looks like that. Kei-chan hesitates for a moment because he has realized which noble house Terron's abilities most closely resemble. When Terron asks about it, Kei-chan finally answers that Terron's bloodline likely comes from a great noble house, known as the Pursuers of Hunters. That house is House Zahar. Hearing that name, Terron becomes shocked. The situation is simple yet complicated at the same time. House Zahar is the very same house that once fought a devastating war against House Arabian, the family Kei-chan served. Terron does not know what he should say. He wonders if he should apologize, even though those events were actions taken by relatives he has never even met. Noticing his worried expression, Terron gently calls his name and places a hand on his shoulder. He tells Terron not to look so troubled, because he himself did not participate in that war. Terron says with a calm smile that those were matters between adults. If people keep trying to wash blood with more blood, then wars will never truly end. Terron then asks Terron whether he regrets telling him to go down the mountain, knowing that Terron might eventually join the Zahar family. Terron replies that if Terron goes down the mountain, there is a strong chance he will indeed end up joining House Zahar because of his extraordinary ability. However, Terron says that he trusts Terron's character. Terron does not fully understand what he means. Terron explains that he is talking about the kindness within Terron. Even though Terron had every reason to hide his identity as a wizard forever, he still revealed it in order to save him. If someone like Terron were to join the Zahar family and eventually rise to a high position, perhaps he could prevent another terrible war like the one Terron experienced. In the end, Terron says there is no need to think about such heavy matters right now. After all, Terron has not yet decided whether he will actually join House Zahar. After thinking for a moment, Terron smiles slightly and says that he wants to try going down the mountain. Terron nods with approval and says that Terron has made a wise decision. However, Terron adds that he will only go down after Terron's injury has healed. Terron laughs and calls the wound nothing more than a small scratch. After that, Terron begins teaching Terron the fundamentals of magic. He explains that to use magic, one absolutely needs mana, which is why mana is often called the key of omnipotence. However, he quickly clarifies that mana is not truly omnipotent power, as the name might suggest. In order to use magic properly, a wizard must possess mana that matches the type of magic they want to perform. Terron asks what determines whether a wizard's mana matches a certain type of magic. Terron explains that the difficulty of magic is largely determined by three main factors: bloodline, affinity, and causality. The first factor is bloodline, which is decided by the lineage a person is born with. This factor mainly applies to noble families rather than knights. Terron gives an example, saying that it would be extremely difficult for Terron to heal his wound using magic. However, for the Ravista bloodline from the southern region, healing magic is something they can perform easily, even without proper training. That kind of ability comes directly from the power inherited through their bloodline. Terron then asks about the second factor, affinity. Terron explains that affinity refers to the natural tendency for a wizard to perform certain types of actions more effectively, if they are familiar with them or personally suited to them. Terron realizes something, and asks if that is similar to when he created a fireball while throwing a stone earlier. Terron stands up slightly and says that Terron is correct. If Terron had simply tried to create fire normally, he would never have achieved the same speed or power that he did while combining it with something he was already skilled at, like throwing stones. Finally, Terron explains the third and most important factor, causality. He admits that even he does not fully understand it himself. To demonstrate, he asks Terron what would happen if Terron tried to kill him directly using only mana. Terron thinks for a moment, and says that probably nothing would happen except for some light appearing, and that would be the end of it. Terron nods and pours mana into a cup of water on the table. Suddenly the water begins to boil, forming countless tiny bubbles. He explains that this strange phenomenon happens when there is no proper causality for the desired outcome. When someone tries to achieve something that is too far removed from a natural cause, magic becomes unstable or ineffective. Terron thinks carefully and says that he believes he understands what causality means. He then pours his own mana into the cup. A small flame appears on the surface while the water begins draining out of the cup. Terron explains that if he wanted to kill someone, instead of simply wishing for death with mana, he would need to create a cause of death, such as forming flames and launching them at the target. Creating and firing flames is a far more natural process than trying to magically make someone die instantly. Terron's face brightens as he praises Terron's understanding. He even jokes that Terron might have become a scholar rather than a wizard. Terron then asks another question. He wonders why he can easily control ordinary animals, yet magical beasts require more complicated methods to influence. Terron answers that the difference comes from mana itself. Magical creatures possess mana within their bodies, which makes them resistant to simple control. The lesson continues inside the house as time passes. Eventually, Terron begins to realize that magic is far more complicated than he originally thought. After thinking about everything he has learned, Terron asks if the Zahar bloodline also possesses any special magical ability. Terron replies that the Zahar family is famous for their mastery of stealth and tracking magic. Curious, Terron asks if he can try using it himself. Terron agrees. Closing his eyes, Terron begins focusing his mind. He imagines that no one can see him, that no sound can be heard from him, and that even his scent cannot be detected. A moment later, his body completely disappears. Terron asks if the spell worked. Terron stares forward in shock and confirms that it worked perfectly. He cannot see Terron at all. After a moment, Terron releases the spell and reappears. Terron says that it has been a long time since he last saw that ability, but it remains a terrifying power. During the war, the Knights of House Arabian feared that stealth ability more than anything else. However, Kaon warns Terron not to become overconfident. Even such a powerful ability is not invincible. Finally, Kachon tells Terron that he will teach him a few methods of magical training to help improve his control. Terron asks if it is really acceptable for him to train a wizard who belongs to an enemy family's bloodline. Kachon simply replies that Terron saved his life, and more importantly, he trusts Terron's character. After some days, when the village chief hears that Terron plans to leave the village and sell all his sheep, he becomes furious. The chief shouts at him, asking who will take care of the farm now, and how Terron could make such an important decision without consulting the village first. Terron becomes irritated and replies that it is their own problem, so they should figure it out themselves. He asks the chief why it should matter to him, what Terron decides to do with his own belongings. Terron calmly adds that he hopes they will buy his sheep at a fair price. Otherwise, he will simply release them all and leave. The villagers can try to catch them afterward, but they will probably have a very hard time doing so. The village chief looks at Terron and realizes that this stubborn boy is the type who always keeps his word. There is no benefit in provoking him further. In the end, the chief reluctantly hands him a pouch of money, telling him to leave or stay as he pleases. Soon after, Terron begins his journey with Kiorn. As they travel, Terron suddenly remembers something. The villagers still owe Kiorn compensation for defeating the monster. However, Kiorn calmly says that he has no intention of accepting such payment. After all, it was actually Terron who killed the magical beast. Eventually, the time comes for the two of them to part ways, since their paths lead in different directions. Kiorn apologizes for refusing Terron's offer to travel together, explaining that he has always been more comfortable wandering alone. Terron understands and thanks him sincerely for everything he has taught him. Kiorn smiles and tells Terron to take care of himself. Terron replies that he hopes the next time they meet, it will be with smiling faces. Terron watches Kiorn's retreating figure for a long time as the old knight slowly disappears into the distance. Only later does Terron realize something about himself. The reason he disliked hearing Kachon speak formally to him was because deep inside, he had always been yearning for a father figure. Although he received plenty of love from his mother, the boy had secretly wished for someone who could show him what kind of man he should become. After that, the scene shifts to a vast desert where Terron is now traveling alone. While walking along, he notices a group of people ahead who appear to be merchants. Thinking it would be a good idea to ask for directions to the nearest town, Terron walks up to them. Their leader immediately asks why he has blocked their path. Terron politely introduces himself as a traveler and asks them if they know the direction to the nearest city. The leader tells him that if he follows the road they came from, he will eventually reach a city called Muri. Terron thanks them for the information and prepares to leave. However, one of the men suddenly stops him. With a faint smile, the man says that Terron is simply planning to walk away after receiving useful information. The man asks what they want. The man replies that if someone receives something, they should give something in return. At that moment, the men surrounding him slowly draw their swords and form a circle around Terron. They order him to remove his belongings. Terron calmly asks if they are bandits. The man openly admits it. Their leader explains that this wasteland is a place where no one would find it strange if someone disappeared forever. Raising his sword and pressing it lightly against Terron's neck, he says that killing him and stripping the body would take too much time and make an unnecessary mess, so it would be better if Terron simply handed over his bag and cloak. Suddenly, a smile appears on Terron's face. Looking at the bandits calmly, he says that it seems he will have to use them for practice. The bandit leader looks at Terron and tells his men that this lunatic is speaking as if he were some kind of wizard. In response, Terron simply raises his hand and makes a small gesture. Instantly, wind magic bursts outward, throwing all the men around him through the air. While watching them crash onto the ground, Terron calmly thinks that instead of gathering wind from thin air, shaping it with his hands and amplifying it, uses far less mana. The bandits slam heavily into the sand, groaning in pain. Terron continues thinking that he never expected he could create such powerful wind using so little mana. After that, he takes a small amount of water from his bottle and begins shaping it with magic. The water splits into several small floating bullets around him. One of the bandits stares in shock, but before he can react, the water bullets shoot forward. The man is pierced through the body, collapsing immediately. Watching the result, Terron casually thinks that simply throwing stones still feels faster and stronger. Seeing his men being killed so easily, the bandit leader suddenly falls to his knees and begs Terron to stop. He calls him a wizard and says they will give him anything he wants if he spares his life. However, from behind Terron, several surviving bandits suddenly rush forward in a desperate attack. Without even turning around, Terron stomps his foot on the ground. Instantly, sharp sand arrows erupt from the desert floor, piercing all 4 attackers at once. The bandit leader watches in horror, muttering that it is impossible. He cannot believe that his 4 remaining men were killed in a single moment. Terron then calmly asks him one question. He wonders why they attacked him without even making a proper plan. If he was a traveler walking alone, there was always the possibility that he could be a wizard. The bandit leader answers honestly. He says it was because Terron bowed his head politely when greeting them. Even when they spoke rudely, Terron remained respectful, so they assumed he was just an ordinary traveler. Terron nods slightly and thanks the man, saying that he has learned something useful. The bandit leader's face brightens as he believes this means he will be spared. At that moment, however, a magical water bullet forms silently in front of his forehead. As the water bullet fires forward, Terron remembers something Terron once told him before they parted ways. Terron had warned that from now on Terron would meet many different kinds of people, but he must never show mercy to people like bandits, the kind who harm others without hesitation just to make a profit. Now Terron finally understands why Terron said those words. He mutters quietly that if he spared someone like this out of pity, it might end up harming 10 more innocent people later. Afterward, Terron sighs quietly, realizing that he has stalled here longer than expected. He begins following the tracks of the bandits' cartwheels across the desert sand. One thought burns deeply in Terron's mind. He has killed people. Although he feels a sense of guilt, he knows he could not simply let them go. Terron's warning echoes again in his mind. People who are willing to rob and kill others for profit will always find new victims if they are spared. The desert wind slowly erases the cart tracks as weeds grow across the fading path. Eventually, Terron reaches the top of a ridge and looks ahead. For the first time, he sees the city of Murai. Even though it is called a small city, to him it looks enormous. He finally enters the city of Murai. This is the first time in his life that he has seen so many people gathered in one place. The streets are crowded with travelers, merchants, and townsfolk moving in every direction. Even the buildings look completely different from the simple houses in his village. The tall structures and busy streets make him realize that he has truly arrived in a city. As he walks through the marketplace, Terron approaches a fruit vendor to ask for some information. However, the vendor immediately becomes irritated and tells him that if he is not planning to buy fruit, he should get lost. Terron becomes confused by the rude reaction. He wonders if perhaps there is some unspoken rule in cities where people must buy something before asking questions. So Terron asks the vendor for the price of the fruit and begins counting his coins. The vendor notices this and asks if Terron is an outsider. After Terron pays for the fruit, the vendor finally tells him the direction to the nearest inn. Following the directions, Terron soon arrives at the inn. As he enters, one of the staff members named Lena greets him with a bright smile and cheerfully remarks that he is quite a handsome guest. Terron asks her how much she charged for one night. Lena smiles and tells him the price is 16 coins. Terron immediately pays the fee and then tells her that he has something he would like to ask. He asks whether there are any monsters nearby that currently have bounties placed on them. Lena becomes visibly surprised when she hears that question. Meanwhile, Terron thinks to himself that he needs to hunt monsters and absorb their mana, just like Terron told him. Hunting monsters will also allow him to earn money while growing stronger. Noticing her silence, Terron asks why she is not answering. Lena quickly smiles and jokingly says that there are no such things as monsters in this world. After finishing the payment, Lena then explains that if he wants information about monster bounties, he should visit City Hall. Terron asks what City Hall is, and Lena looks shocked that he does not know such a basic thing. She quickly realizes that he truly must be from the countryside. She explains that City Hall is the place where the city handles public affairs. The officials working there serve the city's lord and manage various matters. However, she adds that it is probably already closed since the sun has gone down. If Terron wants to find monster bounties, he should go there tomorrow morning. After that, Lena asks him curiously if he is a monster hunter. Terron asks what that means. Lena explains that there are rumors saying that if an ordinary person hunts monsters, they can eventually become a wizard. However, she personally believes that story is just a silly superstition believed by fools. Suddenly, someone places a hand on Terron's shoulder and says that it is actually a real fact that people can become wizards by killing monsters. The man introduces himself as Maidon, a monster hunter. With confidence, he claims that he has seen it with his own eyes. Lena looks at him with disbelief and asks how he is still alive after chasing such dreams. Maidon simply smiles and replies that he has no intention of dying until he becomes a wizard himself. Hearing this, Terron stands up with interest and asks him to explain what he means. Maidon begins explaining that wizards grow stronger when they hunt monsters because they absorb mana from them. By the same principle, he believes that if an ordinary person kills a monster, they can awaken as a wizard. He proudly adds that this belief is exactly why the four of them have become monster hunters. The three men standing behind him nod in agreement. Terron asks whether that means someone among them has already become a wizard. Maidon shakes his head and says that in this city there are only 4 true wizards, the city lord and 3 others who serve under him. Maidon then looks at Terron and asks if he would like to become a monster hunter as well. Curious, he asks to see Terron's weapon. Terron shows him his slingshot. Maidon examines it carefully and immediately notices that it has been used a lot. Terron explains that it is very effective for firing objects about the size of an egg quickly. Midan nods and says that with a weapon like that, Terron could easily hunt small monsters like rabbit or fox beasts. He then admits that they were just talking about how useful it would be to have one more ranged fighter in their group. Because of that, he asks Terron if he would be interested in hunting monsters together with them. However, Terron politely declines the offer and thanks them anyway. After that, Terron lies on the bed inside his room, quietly thinking that there is no reason for him to hunt monsters together with Midan and his group. The entire day has been chaotic for him, and he still finds it hard to believe that he actually left the village. Staring at the ceiling, he mutters inwardly, wondering what will happen to him from now on. Just as he begins to relax, he suddenly hears a faint sound outside his room. Immediately, he remembers Kaorn's warning that a city is not automatically a safe place, and that one should never let their guard down. Terron quietly approaches the door while gathering mana in his hand. Slowly, he opens the door just a little. Standing outside is the inn staff member Lena, smiling brightly as she asks if he is already asleep. She explains that she thought the room might feel cold, and says she came to keep him warm. Terron does not understand what she means at first. Lena then moves closer, and clearly suggests that for a small amount of money, she would be willing to spend the night with him. Terron's expression immediately stiffens. The situation makes him extremely uncomfortable. At that moment, he recalls another one of Kaorn's warnings. Kaorn had once told him that one must always be careful around inmaids or prostitutes. Many of them carry diseases, and while wizards usually have strong resistance to illness, carelessness could still lead to trouble later. Remembering those words, Terron quickly refuses. Lena becomes annoyed and storms back downstairs in frustration. Inside his room again, Terron sighs. He thinks about how earlier the fruit vendor charged him just to answer a question, and now Lena had come with a different kind of offer. It makes him feel that cities are places where even small conversations and bits of information seem to have a price. He mutters to himself that cities really do seem cold-hearted. However, while lying in bed, he suddenly hears voices from downstairs. It is Midan and his companions talking. One of Midan's men asks why he offered to let that strange newcomer join their group earlier. The man says that Terron did not look like he would be much help. Midan replies that the reason is simple. Terron reminds him of himself when he was younger. Hearing that the boy planned to hunt monsters with nothing but a slingshot made him worried. Midan says that if Terron stayed near him during hunts, he might at least survive a little longer. Listening to their conversation from his room, Terron quietly realizes that perhaps the city is not entirely cold-hearted after all. The next morning, Terron visits City Hall. He greets one of the officials there, but the man responds in a rather rude tone. Terron explains that he came because he wants to hunt monsters. He also remembers Kaorn's earlier advice that the world will not treat him kindly. If he wants people to treat him with respect, the easiest way would be to reveal that he is a wizard. Ordinary people would immediately bow their heads. However, Terron chooses not to reveal his identity. The official shows him a request for a monster called the Crow Monster, saying it is the only job available at the moment. The official still speaks in a dismissive tone. He tells Terron that if he manages to kill the monster, he must bring the corpse back to the city. If a wizard does not disperse the mana of a dead monster, it will become a wraith. Under city law, anyone who kills a monster and leaves the corpse abandoned can face severe punishment, even execution. Terron already understands this very well after what happened earlier. He knows he cannot repeat that mistake. Before leaving, he asks the official why the knights do not hunt monsters themselves. The official replies rudely that the job of knights is to maintain order within the city. Hunting monsters outside the walls is work meant for people like Terron. After that, Terron leaves City Hall. Sometime later, he returns. All the officials inside the hall are shocked. They cannot believe he returned so quickly. They ask if he really killed the monster alone, and Terron calmly confirms that he did. When Terron asks about the bounty, one of the officials immediately runs to fetch a pouch of coins. He hands it to Terron and tells him to rest well since he must have worked hard. The officials continue staring at the monster's corpse in disbelief. They are amazed that someone could bring back the crow monster in such good condition. Then one of the officials notices that Terron is still standing there. They all look at him in confusion. Terron calmly asks if there are any other monsters worth hunting. Hearing that, the officials become even more shocked. They cannot believe that this ordinary-looking man still wants to continue hunting monsters. The scene shifts to the inn, where Lena has prepared a large table full of food for Terron. With a bright expression, she tells him that she never imagined someone like him could defeat 30 monsters in just 3 days. She adds that he must have made a lot of money during that time. Terron calmly replies that money is not his only goal. Inwardly, he thinks that what truly matters to him is the mana from monsters, and thanks to those hunts he has definitely grown stronger. Looking at himself quietly, he realizes that compared to when he first met Kaorn, his mana has already increased several times over. However, he also understands that absorbing mana from only weak monsters will eventually make it difficult to grow much stronger. Noticing his expression, Lena suddenly asks him what happened. Terron asks her suspiciously if she secretly stole a bite of his food. Lena immediately denies it and says that he ate everything himself. She laughs and tells him that even though he looks skinny, he can really eat a lot. At that moment, the chef also appears and proudly says that he has not cooked like that in a long time, and he is happy that Terron enjoyed the meal. Terron politely thanks him and says the food was delicious. Suddenly, someone grabs Terron from behind. It is one of Midon's men, who loudly comments that Terron seems to be eating something very tasty. The man mockingly calls him a skinny runt and says he has heard that Terron has been making a lot of money recently. With a greedy smile, he asks if Terron plans to share some charity. In the next moment, Terron calmly slams his hand into the man's face. The man curses angrily, calling him a bastard. Terron looks confused and asks if the man did not want some charity. Another man suddenly throws a punch toward Terron, but Terron smoothly slides past the attack and strikes him instead, sending him crashing onto the ground. A third man rushes forward while swinging a bench, but Terron stops the attack and knocks him down using nothing more than a single finger strike. Seeing the chaos inside the inn, Lena clenches her teeth and yells at them to take the fight outside. Later that evening, Midon appears outside Terron's room with his men. He apologizes sincerely for what happened and assures Terron that it will not happen again because he has already given them a proper scolding. Midnid explains that their group has been short on money lately, and his men likely became jealous after seeing Terron earning so much. The two men who attacked earlier also apologize. Terron asks if things have been difficult recently. Midon honestly admits that they have been struggling. In fact, within 3 days they might not even be able to afford the inn's room fees anymore. After hearing this, Terron quietly hands Midon a pouch of money. Midon looks surprised and asks why he is giving it to them. Terron replies that it is simply repayment for the kindness Midon showed earlier, when he offered to let him join their group because he was worried about him. However, Terron adds that the money is not a gift. Instead, he wants information in exchange. Midon immediately smiles brightly and says that information is something he knows well, and he promises to tell Terron everything. Sometime later, Terron stands alone on a cliff overlooking the city. Looking down at the buildings, he quietly thinks that this might be his final hunt in this place. Midon has already told him about the next city, so it is probably time for him to leave. He remembers their earlier conversation and realizes that Midon shared far more useful information than he expected. Terron thinks that Midon is truly a good person. Unlike Kiorn, who feels experienced and wise, Midon feels more innocent and straightforward. Suddenly, Terron notices something strange in the air. It is the smell of blood. Immediately, he begins running toward the forest, hoping that his suspicion is wrong. Soon he finds claw marks carved deep into a tree, and his heart sinks. Not far away, he discovers the body of one of Midon's men lying on the ground. Looking around further, he sees Midon himself lying dead nearby. Sitting beside the body, Terron mutters in disbelief, asking what in the world happened here. One of Midon's men is still barely alive. With his last strength, he whispers about a rabbit monster. At that moment, Terron notices the creature standing nearby. The rabbit monster's eyes glow red as it suddenly lunges toward him. Terron quickly dodges the attack, clenching his teeth as he realizes he almost got hit. He immediately spins his slingshot and fires several stones toward the monster. 3 stones fly toward the rabbit with enough force to pierce it, but the monster easily slices all of them apart with its claws. Terron is shocked. This monster clearly has techniques specifically meant to counter thrown weapons. The rabbit monster charges at him again with terrifying speed, but Terron suddenly disappears. In the next instant, he appears behind the creature and stabs it. The monster screams in pain as Terron jumps back and vanishes again using his bloodline stealth ability. Enraged, the monster begins attacking wildly, cutting down tree after tree as it desperately tries to locate him. After some time, the forest is filled with fallen trees, but the monster cannot find Terron. Eventually, weakened by its wound, the creature collapses and dies. Terron finally reappears. He raises his hand and begins absorbing the monster's mana. Immediately, he notices that the amount flowing into him is far greater than before. It is even more powerful than the leopard monster he fought when he first left the village. Behind him, the dying man weakly asks if Terron is a wizard. Terron quietly confirms that he is. He then asks whether any of them have family members to whom he can deliver their belongings. The man shakes his head while crying. Looking at Midon's body, Terron remembers when Midon once told him about the nearby city called Orem. Midon had also mentioned that the city contains a massive library with thousands of books, although ordinary people are not allowed to enter. When Terron asked how someone could enter such a place, Midon explained that only wizards are permitted inside. Back in the forest, Terron buries Midon and the others. Standing before their graves, he quietly says that he hopes they are at peace. After that, he turns away and begins his journey toward the next city. After some time, Terron arrives at the great city of Orem. Standing in the long line of travelers waiting to enter, he feels slightly embarrassed, remembering how shocked he was when he first saw the small city of Moray. Compared to that place, Orem is on a completely different level. He never imagined there could be so many people trying to enter a single city. While waiting in line, he notices that the guards are carefully screening people and checking wanted notices. Seeing this system in place, Terron realizes that such strict security is to be expected for a great city like this. When his turn arrives, a fat guard stops him and looks at his dusty travel clothes. The guard points out that Terron should at least dust himself off before entering such a place. After finally entering the city, Terron suddenly notices a massive tower rising into the sky. He stares at it in disbelief. Realizing what it is, Terron mutters that this must be the library Madan talked about. The structure is enormous, and he cannot help but think that a building of that size must have been constructed using magic. When he arrives at the library gate, 2 knights stand guard there. Terron asks about entering the library. One of the knights immediately answers that only wizards are allowed inside. Terron calmly replies that he is a wizard. The knight suddenly shouts at him angrily, warning that impersonating a wizard is a crime that could cost him his life. However, the knight then raises his hand. Because wizards can recognize each other by sensing each other's mana. Just by looking at a person's mana, they can even tell whether the other wizard is stronger than them. As the knight activates his mana to examine Terron, his expression suddenly changes. In the next moment, he is overwhelmed by the sheer power of Terron's mana and collapses onto the ground. The other knight rushes over and asks if he is all right. The fallen knight, however, looks completely shocked. In his mind, he realizes that the man in front of them is definitely not an ordinary wizard. He quickly stands up and bows respectfully. Introducing himself as Kenya from House Valtus, he apologizes for his earlier behavior. Kenya then politely asks Terron which noble house he belongs to. Terron calmly asks whether it is absolutely necessary to mention a house name just to enter the library. The knight hesitates nervously and explains that to use the library, one must first receive permission from the lord of the city. Sometime later, Terron finds himself inside the lord's castle, completely confused about how things progressed so quickly. At that moment, several maids are helping him take a bath. Terron feels extremely embarrassed as they wash and attend to him. He politely tells them that it is fine and that he can wash himself. However, the maids quickly explain that if they fail to properly serve an esteemed guest, they will be punished. Hearing that, Terron reluctantly tells them to do whatever they think is necessary. After the bath is finished, the maids stare at Terron in amazement. With clean clothes and proper grooming, he now looks like a young prince. Terron notices their reactions and asks if there is something on his face. One maid shyly admits that she momentarily lost herself because of his appearance. Another maid quickly apologizes. Terron calmly replies that there is nothing to forgive. However, the maids immediately ask him not to speak to them so casually, since he is an honored guest. At that moment, a young woman with long red hair enters the room. It is clear from her presence that she is a noble wizard. With a faint smile, she asks Terron if he is the guest who arrived earlier looking like a beggar. She then looks him over and says that after washing and dressing properly, he now looks like a prince. Terron introduces himself. The girl replies that her name is Azella. She then asks him which noble house he belongs to. Terron answers that for personal reasons it is difficult for him to reveal his house name. Hearing this, Azella becomes curious. Inwardly, she thinks that he must be hiding something. Deciding to test him, she quietly releases her golden aura, filling the entire room with overwhelming magical energy. Without saying anything, she silently challenges him to reveal his power as well. Terron responds by releasing his own mana. Instantly, blue lightning-like energy erupts from his body as their mana collides in the air. The nearby maids quickly move into defensive positions. After a brief moment, Terron sighs and stops. Azella smiles with excitement after witnessing the display. Looking at her slightly trembling hand, she admits that his power is truly amazing. Then she suddenly steps closer to him. With a playful smile, she says that if he wants, he could marry her. Terron becomes completely baffled, not understanding what just happened. Azella bursts into laughter and explains that it was just a joke. However, before leaving the room, she tells him that he should still think about the offer once. After all, the seat beside her is currently empty. With those words, she turns and leaves. Left alone in the room, Terron quietly looks down at his own trembling hand. He realizes something important. The woman named Azella possesses mana at least equal to his own. Later, Terron is summoned by the lord of the city. The man welcomes him politely, addressing him as a young noble. The lord introduces himself as Rug Valtus, the head of House Valtus, and the ruler of Orem. Terron introduces himself in return. Rug Valtus asks whether Terron wishes to use the library. He explains that many people come here after hearing rumors about powerful ancient magic hidden inside. However, he clarifies that there is nothing like that. There are no secret spells that instantly increase mana, nor any forbidden ancient magic. Terron calmly replies that it does not matter to him because that was never his goal. Rug Valtus nods and says that if Terron still wishes to use the library, he will not stop him. After all, there is nothing inside that contains confidential information related to House Valtus. Standing beside the window and looking at the towering library, the Lord mentions that the library is already closed for the night. He tells Terron to rest and visit it the next morning. Early the next day, Terron visits the library. This time, the knights guarding the entrance immediately bow respectfully and welcome him inside. As Terron steps into the building, he becomes completely baffled. The inside of the tower stretches endlessly upward with long staircases, and everywhere he looks there are countless books stacked on shelves. This is the first time in Terron's life that he has ever seen a library. Suddenly, a small girl appears in front of him and introduces herself as the librarian. She explains that by order of the Lord she will explain the rules for using the library. Terron is shocked because he cannot understand how such a small child could possibly be a librarian. The girl calmly explains that the rules are simple. If anything inside the library is damaged, the user must compensate for it. Also, no book is allowed to be taken outside the building. She then steps closer and quietly adds that while Terron is using the library, she will be watching him the entire time. Terron awkwardly asks if she could stand a little farther away while he reads because it makes him uncomfortable. Then he asks if she could recommend some books. The girl asks what kind of books he wants. She suggests romance, history, or even something erotic since he is young. Terron falls silent for a moment at that unexpected suggestion. Afterward, he simply says that he wants to learn basic common sense about the world. Sometime later, the librarian returns with several books and places them on the table. She explains that many books in the library are hundreds of years old and may be too complicated, but the section she brought should be useful for him. Terron thanks her. He then picks up one of the books. It is the first book he has ever held in his life. When he opens it and begins reading, he becomes completely amazed by the information inside. From that day onward, Terron follows the same routine every day, spending hours inside the library reading. Gradually, he begins to understand the geography of the world, the different races living across the lands, the etiquette followed by wizards, and the various ways items are manufactured and processed. With every piece of knowledge he learns, the world that once felt like an endless unknown space slowly becomes clearer and more vivid to him. After some time, Rugvaltus summons Terron again and asks him how he found the library. Terron honestly replies that it has been extremely helpful. The Lord nods, and then explains something important. He says that allowing Terron to use the library freely was an act of goodwill, separate from treating him as a noble. Because of that goodwill, he would now like to receive something in return. Terron asks what he wants. Rugvaltus explains that a monster has appeared north of Aurum, attacking travelers along the trade road. 4 knight-class wizards were sent to subjugate it, but none of them returned. They were all eaten. The Lord says that this situation now requires someone of noble rank to personally deal with it, but his house currently only has 2 nobles available. He asks Terron what he would want in return for helping with the mission. Terron immediately agrees, without asking for anything. Inwardly, he thinks that protecting people is what a wizard ought to do. However, something still feels strange to him, because according to what the official in the previous city said, wizards normally do not involve themselves in these kinds of tasks. The Lord continues explaining that the Northern Road is an extremely important trade route for Aurum, and it has been blocked for 10 days. Hearing this, Terron realizes that the monster appeared before he even arrived in the city. He quietly understands that the reason the Lord allowed him to use the library so easily was probably because he wanted Terron's help from the beginning. Soon after, a group of wizards prepare to head out for the subjugation. Terron joins them. Among them is the Lord's daughter, Azella, along with another noble wizard named Marvin Valtus. Azella casually comments that her father is really something else, since he even mobilized a guest wizard to hunt a monster. She jokingly asks whether they are really that unreliable. Marvin tries to say that calling the Lord fussy might be inappropriate, but Azella glares at him and he quickly falls silent. Marvin then politely introduces himself to Terron. Soon the group enters the forest. Azella says they should finish the mission quickly so they can return and rest. Marvin quietly asks Terron whether he has any interest in Azella. Terron immediately denies it, which visibly relieves Marvin. Suddenly the group stops. In front of them lies a broken horse carriage. One knight explains that the Lord had forbidden anyone from traveling north, so the victims must have come from the southern road and been attacked here. Terron examines the scene carefully. On the wooden frame of the carriage he notices a distinct hand-shaped mark. After thinking for a moment, he says that the monster is probably a monkey-type creature. Azella asks in disbelief how he can tell. Terron points to the handprint and explains that the pattern clearly resembles a humanoid monkey hand. He believes the monster attacked the merchants and then returned into the forest. If they follow the trail, they should find it. Azella asks Marvin if he can track the creature with magic, but he shakes his head. Marvin asks if any knight can do it. Instead, Terron picks up a piece of cloth from the ground and says he will try. Azella becomes curious and asks if Terron belongs to that bloodline. Terron casually replies that he simply uses this method often, so he is used to it. After smelling the cloth, Terron suddenly senses the trail of the monster as if it appeared clearly in front of him. He immediately points toward the direction the monster went. After following the trail for some time, they reach a river. Terron explains that the trail disappeared here because the monster likely washed its body in the water. Azella finds it hard to believe that a mere beast would do such a thing just to avoid being tracked. Terron calmly replies that maybe it simply washed itself because it wanted to. Suddenly, the trail appears again in Terron's senses. At the same moment, he shouts for everyone to watch their backs. A massive apostle monkey-type monster suddenly leaps from behind them. The creature swings its arms, launching a storm of sharp stones. One knight shouts for everyone to dodge. Several knights are instantly pierced by the flying stones. Terron narrowly dodges the attack. However, he is shocked when he sees Azella and Marvin protecting themselves by using the knights as human shields, pushing their bodies forward to block the stones before throwing them aside. At that moment, Terron finally understands something clearly. His mother was right. To nobles, knights are nothing more than disposable tools. Azella then orders the remaining knights to attack the monster. As the knights raise their swords and rush forward, the monkey monster suddenly turns and begins running away. Azella, Marvin, and their knights immediately chase after it. Azella suddenly notices something incredibly fast passing beside her. A magical stone shoots forward through the air. Before anyone can react, the stone pierces straight through the chest of the monkey monster. The creature screams in agony. Both Azella and Marvin stop in confusion and turn around to see who fired the attack. Standing behind them calmly is Terron, swinging his slingshot. Without saying a word, he has just shown them who the real monster hunter is.